Okay, here's one major difference that seems striking to me from a novel writer's perspective. Those of you who haven't read the book don't know that the book starts in the first person. There's a line in the first person, and then it converts to third person rotating points of view from each member of the family, so that you sort of forget about the first person sentence and you believe that you're lulled into an actual traditional third person narration until the very end, when the first person comes back, and it's basically Paul Hood announcing that he's telling the entire story. Now that's a kind of novelistic strategy that absolutely can't be reproduced by cinema. Cinema's in the third person by and large, except for wobbly shots of the monster coming out of the lagoon. It's mostly in the third person. So that was never going to happen, you know. But that's the kind of thing where, you know, we get caught up all the time in this argument about, is the film faithful to the book, as though it would be possible ever for a film to be faithful to a book. There's such different media, they have such different interests. So, you know, I never would have been in the condition of believing that they were going to be able to approximate that first person, third person wobbliness. Yes?
Yeah, I found a lot of the things visually very evocative of the early 70s, but I missed sort of a soundtrack that would be more, at least what I experienced in the early 70s. And I imagine there was probably some budgetary constraints in terms of not having a lot of big hits, but I was interested what sort of soundtrack you would imagine for the film.
Are you a Danish guy with an American accent or an American guy?
I'm an American guy.
Well, you're exactly right that it was budgetary. And the budget for the ice storm was $16 million. So it's a tiny little budget by Hollywood standards. Today it'd be considered minuscule. And they just didn't have money for rights clearance. And I actually was encouraged to sort of spend time with Tobey Maguire a little bit. So before they shot, because they wanted him, I think, to capture some of the Rick essence, and, which is why he seems hopelessly awkward. And I gave him a whole cassette, because these were the days of cassettes, with a whole bunch of early 70s music on it that I was like, this is what I was listening to, man, you gotta hear all this stuff. He didn't pay any attention, nor did they, when I said, you know, like, boy, these music choices are kind of odd, can I give you a couple of hints? You know, it was just what they could get.
Right. Well, they also composed a bunch.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm interested in what you would have.
What songs
Yeah.
I've done? Isn't that sort of a Nick Hornby exercise?
Yeah.
I mean,
but I know you go up.
yeah, I mean, obviously that was the period of my life where I learned about music, you know, because I had an older sister who was good about loaning me records. So, you know, in 1973, I went from listening to Elton John's hits to suddenly listening to Dark Side of the Moon and Full War and stuff. So my memory of the early 70s is of listening to Stairway to Heaven and stuff like that. So everybody has their nostalgia for that music. And I think it is important not that the film not get mired in obsessive nostalgia for the music of the period, because that's become such a cliche in Hollywood films these days. You know, the moment where the beautiful song wells up and it stands in for lazy storytelling. You know, that's what happens. What else? Anything? Yes, sir.
A few minutes ago, you called your character Paul Tobey Maguire, and this difference between seeing the characters or the actors act out their characters from how you imagine them. How does that feel? I mean, I imagine, for example, Ben as a lot uglier. He's described as not that physically attractive. How does it feel seeing this Hollywood crew performing their characters?
That's perhaps the strangest part of the whole process. I mean, if the result of a film is that it doesn't look in your mind the way the story looked in your mind, there's no clearer example of that than the fact that these characters that you thought were true to life suddenly become, you know, shockingly attractive. And, you know, a good example for me, besides the Ben Hood character, is Wendy, who in the book is described as sort of pixie-like blonde, and who suddenly became Christina Ricci in her pudgy period, you know, which is so different from what's in the book, you know. And initially, I really wanted them to hire this actress called Claire Danes, who had just been in My So-Called Life, and I thought she would be perfect for the part. And she actually, I think, turned me down. But I completely, you know, what happens is that you then become accustomed to the choices they make, and you sort of adapt to them. And I came to feel that Christina actually really gave an incredible performance. And she later said, was it you who told me this, or somebody else read an interview with her where she basically said, I don't even remember shooting this. It was like a period in my life where I just I wasn't paying any attention. You know? She had just come off of shooting That Darned Cat, and she sort of thought her career was over. And then she got this part that became sort of the lever for her into making art films and being taken very seriously as an actress. But she was sort of truculent and uncommunicative on the set and so on. So all that stuff happens, and you begin to adapt to their choices, and you forget your own, you know. And what worries me about adaptation in the end is that I don't want you guys forever after, should you open the book, The Ice Storm, to only think about Kevin Kline's Weaver. You know, I want you to try to read the text as it appears there and circumnavigate the film. I don't want the film to inevitably be wedded to it.